At this stage of construction, this is how the footings would look. And when everything's dry, the foundation crew comes in again and starts tying longer pieces of rebar to these L-bars. Then they put forms. Forms are built as the rebar gets tied together. The concrete is poured into the forms. And the forms are removed when the concrete is cured somewhat, usually in a couple of days. As we check different views of our model, the right side view, for example, when I zoom in, this rebar should be in a straight line, and instead I see 3 pieces of rebar here. That tells me that it's not lined up straight. So what we need to do is go back to the home view. We need to add one more constraint to the other side of these rebar configurations to straighten it up. Here's how it's done. You zoom in, leave it on Make Constraint, and pick this piece of L-bar on the other side of the footing. Click this surface of the footing and tell it to also be minus 10 inches. Click OK. Do the same thing to the other two. Constrain, center line to this surface, minus 10. OK. Now when we look at these from the right side or the left, you can see they line up. We're now ready to add our horizontal and vertical rebar that will reinforce the foundation wall. Let's start with the file called Rebar Solid Wall. So I went to Place, put one copy of that in your assembly, and press Escape. This solid wall will be out here on the far side of the porch. Here we have vertical rebar that's 16 inches on center, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces of horizontal rebar, which is what was specified in our chart that we looked at. Click Constrain, leave it on Mate, and instead of the center line, I want to select the bottom of the piece of rebar. If I hold my cursor just right, it won't get the center line, it will get the actual bottom of the rebar, even though I can't see it. So click that, and then click the top of this footing. Click Apply. I found it's easier to center this rebar configuration the same way we did our L-bar configuration. So rather than try to assemble it to the L-bar directly, I'll go like this. Constrain this piece to this side of the footing. And we don't want it to be right here with this one, so let's type minus 11.5 inches. And it'll put it right next to that piece so that it could be tied together. And then click Apply. Now let's center the rebar in the footing. We'll leave it with our default mate settings. Select the center line of this side with the front of the footing. And so it's not right on top of the other rebar, let's go minus 10.5. Click Apply. And then do the same to the other side here. And then click OK. In actual construction, these pieces of rebar would be placed close together and then tied with wire. As you work on this project, if you try to assemble Inventor parts together, if you have problems getting your assembly to work as shown in the videos, come over here and select your Inventor part and delete it and place it again. Next, let's place the rebar configuration that goes on this footing where the doorway will be that goes into the porch. Go to Place. The file is called Rebar Wall with Door. Place one copy. Our first constraint will be the bottom of the piece of rebar, not the center line, to the top of the footing. Click Apply. Our next constraint, click this vertical center line and the end of the footing and set the distance to minus 10.5. Click Apply. And last, select the same piece of rebar and the side of the footing and enter minus 10.3 and click OK. This positions the rebar in a realistic way. Now let's add the last foundation wall rebar configuration for this area. This will contain a window in our foundation wall. Place. The file is called Rebar Wall with Window. One copy. Press Escape. And we'll start the same way by constraining not the axis but the bottom of the piece of rebar to the bottom of the footing. Apply. Then this vertical piece to this side and use a value of minus 14.3 to get this particular configuration to line up. Apply that, and then one more constraint, that axis to this side of the footing, and let's use minus 9.7 as our distance, and then press OK. And that gives us a realistic scenario that looks like real-world construction. Except we aren't showing our wire ties here in Inventor. You can just imagine that they are there, holding all of those joints of rebar together.